Welcome to my channel. This is going to be a process video to explain how I made this mixed media canvas for the video hop hosted by PM Artist Studios with the theme See Me, Ya See. If you want just an overview of this canvas, you can go watch my video from the hop, and in that video I also show my face, so go check that out if that's something you want to see. If you want to see the detailed process of how I made this canvas, stick around and we're going to get right to it. This canvas was really inspired by our almost yearly trips to Prince Edward Island. I don't live anywhere near the sea, but we have family there, so we look forward to going most years. And I wanted to replicate the redness of the earth and the rocks there and how that comes onto the beach. So here I've got my 8x10 jelly plate, and I've put on a burnt umber, a studio acrylic Terra Rouge high viscosity, and a little bit of Artist Loft's Portrait Pink, and I'm just mixing that around loosely. I'm using some items I found on the beach. There's a clamshell, and you can see on the left a bunch of items that I picked up. Some of that wasn't from this year, but most of it was. Here we're using some oysters on the jelly plate. It's nice and flat. You can see the clam, I kind of rotated it, but the oysters I can just push flat. These are some lupin seed pods that I found, because in August the lupins have already bloomed and the seed pods are dry. They grow wild in PEI. It's really quite lovely. Here's a picture of the lupins that you just see at the side of the road. Here I'm using one of the oyster shells to just kind of spread out the PBO paint. Like I said, this one was really thick, so it would take forever to dry. So I thought I'll spread it out with the oyster shell and it'll kind of look, beachy, grungy. Several minutes later, it's still wet, so I continue fiddling around with it, and I'm removing the excess paint onto my 5x7 jelly plate. Now it's dry enough. I'm adding some Payne's gray, a lighter gray to the shells to give them sort of a natural shell appearance, I guess you'd say. So I'm just using a paintbrush to do that. I'm not trying to make too thick of a layer because I do want it to dry before I add my next coat, my pickup layer. After a few minutes it's dry, so I'm using an unbleached titanium by Artist Loft, and I'm also using a Playful Pink by Arteza. It's an iridescent color, and you know how shells have sort of a pearlescence to them? I really wanted to capture that. And I'm adding a little bit of gold as well, because you know when you have like beach sand, it kind of sparkles, so I'm trying to get that feeling. So I remove some of the paint, and my idea for this canvas was to apply the jelly prints directly to the canvas. I watched Carrie the Crafter do a video about that, and he was way more successful than I was. You should check out his video. I'll link it below. I'm pressing it down as much as I can, but it was drying really fast. This first print wasn't too bad. I do let this sit for about 30 minutes with some weight on it to try to get as much contact as possible. Next, I add some of that beachy color to the 5x7 plate. And I'm gonna just press some things in there, and we'll see how I end up using that, because I don't remember as I'm doing this voiceover. It's all a bit of a blur. So I'm just using the brayer to mix the paint up on there, and the shells and the lupin seeds and the oyster. Now I'm flipping that canvas over, and I'm gonna set it aside with some weight on it to let it dry. I think I set aside at least 30 minutes, and here we're pulling off the print. And quite a bit of it came off. This is actually one of the better prints that I did on the canvas. I should mention this canvas I'm using is just a cheapo from Michaels. It's a medium texture cotton duck double primed with acrylic titanium gesso, and it is 16 by 20 inches. I decide to just pull what I have on this plate with the Playful Pink and the bleached titanium, and I stick it on there, and that I'm gonna weigh it down and let it sit another 30 minutes. I'm trying to press underneath the frame like Carrie the Crafter showed, but it was quite a tight canvas. It was difficult to do that. So we're going to set that aside. I try to concentrate weighing it down just on the area where the jelly plate is, and about 30 minutes later we reveal that it's okay. I mean, I didn't have a lot of texture on there, but it's really not, it's not what I envisioned. So I'll be adding some stuff later, you'll see. So here I'm just playing with the jelly plates, trying to figure out how I can piecemeal this bottom section together. And I'm going to go back to the 8x10 plate And I'm going to use this stencil called Happy Stream. It's 8x10 by PM Artist Studio. This one was designed by Miriam Wolf. I'll link their web store below so you can get any of these stencils if you like, and you can use my code DevonFan10 to get 10% off orders over $35 if that's still valid. And I'm also using on the top, the 5x7 plate, I'm using a PM Artist Studio stencil called Fingerprint. And I just put some gold as a base, and then I picked up the gold using just some paper. Here I'm adding some burnt umber, and this is the Grumbacher. I have had this for years and years, so it still works, which is nice. Use what you have. And I'm adding the Artist Loft Portrait Pink and just mixing that in. And then I'll pull the stencil off and we'll let that dry. Just removing some of that excess paint. You can use these extra papers in something else. And here I let it dry. Now we're adding some of that Studio Acrylic High Viscosity Terra Rouge number 63. This one's really extra thick, so I decided to add some glazing medium to thin it down, and I mix it off the plate there. And I'm trying to get it more red, so this is a orange color. I can't remember what brand. More glazing medium. And I'm trying to decide where I'm going to put that on the canvas. It's a bit off camera, but I'm just putting a little bit of that paint on the edge of the 8x10 to just use the part of the plate that I'm going to put on the canvas. Sorry, it was such a big canvas, it was hard to get this all on film, but there you can see the amount that I overlapped it. And again, I let that sit for 30 minutes to dry. Here we're taking it off after the 30 minutes, and it's okay. A lot of the paint stayed on the plate. And I'll do the same with this 5x7. I just put the paint on the areas that I want to add to the canvas. This one I took off too much paint, so it doesn't work. I end up redoing it. This was a lot of trial and error. I'll definitely try this technique again, although in the end, I think it was easier to just add the collage paper, which I'll do. You'll see me do in a little bit. Here I'm adding that pre-mixed color to a few areas, and then I'm gonna let that dry while I'm just waiting for the 5x7 to dry. And then I think we'll put that aside. No, we don't put it aside. We add some of the gray and the Payne's gray. And I'm just using the paintbrush again, and I'm just putting it in loosely, giving essence of beachcombing essence, shall we say. And again, I'm trying not to make it too thick because I don't want to wait forever for it to dry. And I'm just putting a bit more texture in there with the lupin seed pods. So I just had fun playing. It was, I just took my time. That's why this is sped up so much, because it took me at least 2 days to do this canvas. So I sped it up. That's 30 minutes later, and that was like a fail. It's like, wah, wah, wah. So let's try again. Once again, we're about 30 minutes later, and I'm still not picking up the base coats there. I don't know if it's just drying too fast, but the prints are getting worse and worse. I'm still happiest with the first print I did. Here I'm just trying to audition that 8x10 plate to see where I might want to put my next patches. So again, I put the Playful Pink, Portrait Pink, and Unbleached Titanium onto just a part of the plate. I also roll that off onto my 5x7 plate. The 8x10 plate I put on the canvas, I turn it over, I weigh it down. After 30 minutes I'm going to check it, but first I pull the print from the 5x7 plate, and I'm quite happy with that. I actually used onion skin for that, and it's nice and thin, so we'll be using that later in the collage. And then here is this little portion, and it's not very good, spoiler alert, so I try desperately to try to get as much paint off as I can, but it's serving okay to add a background texture. And I'm going to try one more time just to fill in that one gap. This time I believe I just used the Portrait Pink. And Slap it on there, turn it over, and then I wait 30 minutes. The big reveal, and surprise, surprise, I'm not crazy about it. But it does add some interesting sections. Next, I decide to pick up what's left on the 8x10 plate using the Carnival wet strength tissue. And this tissue worked very well for this purpose. It was sent to me by Eddie Makes Art, and he sent me quite a few pieces to try, and so far I'm really liking it. So I'm picking up what's left using the Portrait Rose. I keep saying Portrait Rose, Portrait Pink, and here's the unbleached titanium, and just kind of, this is more of an ombre, and then I use the Carnival wet strength tissue, let it dry, and then we're going to pull it off. And I guess I missed filming the pulling it off, but here it is. It came off really well. You see how clean that plate is. I decided that these pieces would be good to fill in some of the areas that lack some interest. So I just use a ruler to tear the onion skin. And it's a very nice thin paper collage as well. I'm trying to decide where to put it, auditioning it in different spots. And I think I put it roughly there. I tear a little bit more off. And this is all intuitive. I don't have a master plan of, what's going to go where, especially like I'm going to be adding those beach elements I collected, some of them. So I'm not really thinking ahead to that. I'm just putting the base where I think it looks good. So here I just use some matte medium on the canvas, on the back of the onion skin paper, put the paper on the canvas, smoothed it out with my spreader there, and then added some more matte medium on top of that. And I'm doing the same with the wet strength Carnival tissue. Sorry, I got the bottom cut off there a little bit. Oh, I scooched it up. There we go. Carnival wet strength tissue is easier to tear in one direction than it is the other, but I still do my best to tear it because the torn edges really blend in better, almost seamlessly when you collage it on with the matte medium. So here I'm just filling in some of the spots. And you can't see the gold very well, but at the end you'll see, like when I tilt it, you'll see the gold, it does add quite a bit to it. So the matte medium, spread on the back of the paper, put the paper on, smooth it out, put more matte medium on top of the surface. I have this dish soap bottle that I put the matte medium in. That's a trick I learned from Dee Dee Willingham, and it works really well. I'm using the golden matte medium. So I'm just continuing, I'm just using up all these pieces, adding interest. This is why I have it sped up, because this is it's a pretty long process. And that last, I think this is the last piece I'm adding up to the top section there. My favorite part of this whole bottom half is that clam that I have on sort of the left side of the middle at the top there. I really like the clam, so I did not want to cover that up. So I'm just adding a layer of matte medium on top of everything, sealing it in. So I'm pretty happy with that as a base. I'm going to move to the top portion of my canvas, and here I'm pulling out my 12 by 14 inch larger jelly plate, and these are some of the colors I'm thinking of using. This stencil is the Aqueous Effervescent small pattern from PM Artist Studios. So I just fill in portions kind of like the waves breaking near the surface, near the beach. And I'm just kind of bringing that all the way across the jelly plate. This is just some white acrylic paint, and I'm going to let that dry. Turn the stencil over just to put a bit of the excess paint back onto the jelly plate. Kind of gives it that nice frothy look. Once that white's dry, I'm using these three paints, the Aquamarine Craft Smart Metallic, the Folk Art Color Shift in the Pastel Green, that's the first one I'm adding here, and the Color Shift Blue Violet Flash. And I'm just using a paintbrush to paint that on, obviously simulating waves. And my intention is that the surface, when you look at the sea, the surface kind of shimmers and shines back at you. So that's the element I want to add here. So this takes quite a while. I'm going to speed it up even more. You just want to keep those layers nice and thin so that it doesn't take too long to dry. So now that it's dry, I'm going to pick it up using an ombre technique. On the right, I'm using Payne's Gray mixed with some golden high flow indigo. And on the left, a Liquitex Basics turquoise blue. And I'm using a large brayer. It's an 8-inch, 7-inch brayer, and it takes a bit of practice to get that ombre going with that large brayer. But once you practice, it does work really well. And then I'm using the Carnival wet strength tissue. I'm going to let that dry and then we'll pull it off. Give it a nice extra press. So it's been dried for a while, so I'm pulling it off, and you can see how that wet strength tissue just works really well, and it picks up all that paint without tearing. Now my first dilemma here is when I put it on the canvas, I don't like how the turquoise looks. It doesn't look like PEI to me. The water's more of a dark blue gray kind of color, especially with the overcast clouds we had this time. So what I decided to do is tone down that turquoise blue. So I use some metallic paints, some bronze and some copper. I add some of that glazing liquid to it, and with the paintbrush I just simply swipe over the surface. And I'm thinking of, you know, when you're at the water's edge and you're looking down, you have your feet there, you look down and you see the sand beneath the surface. You know, you see the water, but you see the sand. And even the frothiness isn't quite as bright in those areas. Like the waves aren't crashing super hard. So I just toned that whole bottom half of that canvas down using these different metallic paints. I started with a paintbrush. Here I'm using a baby wipe, and it just makes a nice glaze on it. So I felt that suited the theme of this, or the feeling of this canvas better. So here I like a lot more how that goes with it. The second issue I have is that my jelly plate is only 14 inches wide, but my canvas is 16, so I have sort of gaps on either side. I'm going to address that in a moment. First, I decide I'm going to blend in a bit of that copper and bronze onto the lower half to tie it all together. So here I'm just brightening up some areas. I don't want to obliterate anything. I just want a light glaze on there. Again, like when you look at sand, you see it glisten, right? So this extra metallic layer really helps convey that. So in my stash, I found this lighthouse I had done using a magazine image transfer technique. I'll link the video below. That was about a year ago I did that one, and I'll link it below and you can check it out there. This is on resume paper. So it turns out it's almost the perfect height, and it's a good width. So I decided to tear that out. I'm going to scooch that Carnival wet strength tissue over to the right, wrap it around the canvas, and I'm going to glue the lighthouse on the left side. And this isn't a lighthouse I happen to see in PEI. However, it is a lighthouse that is from Prince Edward Island that I'd found in a travel magazine. So I thought that was quite serendipitous. So here you can see it just happens to, you know, match the height. I was really happy with this solution. So I use the matte medium to glue it down, just like I glued down the other collage papers on the bottom. So matte medium on the canvas, on the back of the paper, and then over top of the paper. And this magazine transfer is with acrylic paint, so it's not gonna run when I put the matte medium over top of it. Here I'm using a different matte medium just because I was running low on the one that I have in my dish soap bottle. This is one I think I got at Walmart. It was good. It was nice and smooth, but it really poured out fast from that tube. So I'm just laying the tissue on there, and it was quite easy to lay down. I just used my hand to get the wrinkles out, and again putting the matte medium over top, spreading it and flattening it, getting any air bubbles out using that spreader. That's a silicone spreader. I think it's a Finnabar. I don't know if you can still get them, but you know, any kind of spreader. Some people will use like credit cards or gift cards. Here I'm really getting in there, getting those air bubbles out. And as you can see, I'm wrapping it around the side. I don't know if I've wrapped around I don't think I wrapped around the top. I wrapped around the side. And that's going to solve a problem because this canvas actually has staples exposed on the side. So I decided to add some extra bit that was off the top of that, the the blue C print. I added to the left side there. And then I decided to make extra papers to wrap the sides of the canvas all the way around. Here I don't have my elements glued on yet, so I think they're slipping a bit. I'm going to glue them down in a second. Here I'm using my fingers to glue on whatever extra pieces I have. Next, here I am just using hot glue to glue down these elements. The sea glass on the right, the brown sea glass, I didn't collect that this time. I explained in my hot video that the formation for that sea glass on the right was inspired by when you see stacked rocks. Someone in chat or left a comment saying those are called cairns. I don't know how to say it, C-A-I-R-N-S. And so that's what that emulates. Here I'm putting my signature, and just be careful with the hot glue. It's hot. The feather was the trickiest thing to glue down, but I was happy. I'm happy with the layout. The nice thing about doing something like a hop is you have a deadline. So if I hadn't had a deadline, I probably would have hemmed and hawed and taken a lot longer to figure out where am I going to put these elements. But I had a deadline. I just had to get her done. So I kind of just went with my gut. I went with what I thought looked good, and I didn't second guess myself, and I just did it. Here, I think I missed showing the footage where I put the stencil down and then I put the copper paint and the burnt umber down, lifted up the stencil, letting it dry. I put a bit of the wave stuff on the top. Here I'm adding the portrait pink and the playful pink and a bit of the unbleached titanium and a bit of that PBO gold again. And I'm just kind of using my brayer to mix it in together. And I'm going to use the strips of wet strength Carnival tissue I had left over. And those are going to wrap around the sides and the bottom of the canvas. And then the top part, I use the indigo blue with the Payne's gray to pick that up, and I'm going to use that to cover the top part of the edge. So now I'm pulling these up. They're a little bit not grungy enough, so we're going to grunge them up here in a second. The blue one is pretty right on the right colors that I want. So here I'm adding some copper paint, and I'm just picking up some of that paint and trying to be a little bit more haphazard because I want it to blend in with the front of the canvas. I don't want the sides to look, all perfect when the front of the canvas doesn't look perfect. It's supposed to be like a beach where things are kind of strewn about. It's not all organized. I think there I added a bit of water. Yeah, you can see me spray the water on and just picking it up. So that's a bit of the copper. So I think you get the idea. So next we're going to be adding those onto the edges. It's a little hard to film because the canvas is so big, but here I'm tearing down the blue strip. Wasn't quite long enough, so I cut it in half so that I have enough to go all the way across the top of the canvas. And here's that matte medium. So I'm spraying it on the canvas, on the tissue, and then I just kind of push it on there with my fingers, and then I cover it, and then it gets really sticky, so it's hard to hold the edges without having your fingers stick to it. So I just work my way around. And I'm just adding on the front there a bit to blend the lighthouse scene in there a little bit. Here you can see where I wrapped the sea theme over, like the ocean part on the top half of the canvas. That was just wrapped from the original tissue. And now we're adding strips and bits to fill out the edges and cover those staples. If you're getting a canvas framed, you wouldn't have to do this, but I'm probably just gonna lean it up against the wall on a shelf in my home. That's the other part I mentioned in my hop video, is the lighthouse is from a magazine image. Even though it's from a travel journal or a travel magazine, it's probably copyright. So I wouldn't sell this. This is for my personal collection. I'm not going to be getting money for this canvas. And almost there. If you've watched all of this, well done to you. This is a lot to watch. I don't ever know, like, I know people don't always like things sped up, but I don't think you want to watch like 24 hours of me jelly plating and gluing. So I'm trying to just show you the highlights, explain the process a bit. Basically just kind of go with the flow and solve problems as they arise. That's my motto. Here I'm just adding a bit of the titanium, unbleached titanium to the side because it was just too much bronze there. I think it was too shiny. I just wanted to tone it down a bit. So here is the finished canvas. You can see all these elements I collected from the beach. I described them a little bit more in my video I did for the hop. And here you can see how the metallic and the color shift work on that surface of the sea. And we've got the 3D elements down below. It's fun just to beachcomb and collect things from the beach. And here it is outside. I'm showing you the edges a little bit more. I could have used texture paste to make the frothy waves at the top, but I liked that it was flat. To me, that conveyed distance, like closer to me. There's the 3D objects, they're more present. And then as you look out towards the beach, things get further away. So this was the largest piece I've ever done. I really enjoyed it. I feel like I enjoy participating in PM Artist Studios hops because the themes really push me to try something new and to push the limits of what I know I can do. So thanks for watching. I hope you liked it.